Let me ask, are you a podcaster? Creating videos on YouTube? Testing out live streaming perhaps? Webinars, I dare say? If so, you must check out Streamyard. Streamyard is the easiest way to create content right now in your browser. You can multi-stream to your social media platforms, host a weekly show with special guests, create webinars, record podcasts with local recordings, create videos, and much, much more. And they make it super easy to brand and customize your videos inside the studio before you even go live. Do yourself a favor today and get started for free at StreamYard.com.
And now, for your listening pleasure, here's Polizzi and Rose, covering the week of media, marketing, and digital content news. This old marketing. Take it away, boys.
Hello, my friends. This is Robert Rose, and welcome to episode number 375 of This Old Marketing for Friday, May 12th, 2023. And with me, as always, is my pal, my colleague, and, well, the birthday boy who, even though celebrated his 50th birthday this week, was not coronated the King of England, Mr. Joe Polizzi. Happy birthday.
Thank you so much. It's been, it's as we're recording this, it is the morning of the next day. So my birthday's May 10th.
Yeah.
And so I have to get back to a lot of people, which is, I'm more than excited to do that. It's wonderful hearing from, and
You,
as you know,
you do have
because
post-birthday voice.
This was more than the other birthdays because it's like,
Yes.
oh, okay, it's 50. I've got to really do something special for Joe, and they really did. Between as you donated to Orange Effect Foundation, I have that little fundraiser going on. That's done amazingly well, and then I did the whole giving out The Will to Die, my novel, for free for the next 4 days, and I just thought it was a nice thing to do. I was just like, oh, I have these. When you publish with Amazon KDP, you get like 5 days a year that you can do a free Kindle. And I'm like, well, I haven't ever done it. I'll just do all 5 days. And I go ahead and do it. It's like top 1,000 books now because, it counts, people downloading it for free counts as like a book sold, which it's not. But it's really done well the last 24 hours. I'm very excited. That's the strangest thing for me. Maybe, and you'll get this off of because sometimes people just don't know certain things in your background or what you've done. I had so many people that I'm relatively close with say, I didn't know you wrote a novel. and I want to say, boy, I must be the worst marketer on the planet that you didn't know that I wrote a novel. So,
well, it's, what it is. It's a testament to how really just how ephemeral today's media is, right? How quickly things, and I don't mean we meaning you and me and our customers. I mean we meaning a culture forget.
Yep.
We have such a short memory, and I mean it's gonna, it'll come to play in what we're going to talk about in the news today. But it really is. We, as a culture now, we have an incredibly short memory on things. So even if you're the best marketer in the world and you keep it up for weeks, months, quarters at a time, it's as soon as you stop,
you have to keep
it.
Well, and that's the one thing I didn't keep it in rotation, which is my own fault. You know Justin Welsh, right? Are you familiar with Justin Welsh?
I'm familiar with. I do not know Justin.
So Justin Welsh, he content entrepreneur, very, very successful the last couple of years, has figured out sort of how to play the Twitter and LinkedIn game. He says this all the time. He says, play your hits. Like we as content creators, we feel like, oh, okay, I told that story before. I can't share it again. And Justin's like, you should be sharing that every month on a regular basis.
Oh,
over and over.
And I'm really good at that, I have to say.
You do that. Yeah, you do that really well.
I have a wonderful person who helps me schedule and pull and calendarize my social media feed, and she pulls my hits, and we go over it together. We go over the calendar together, and so I have, I in addition to the new stuff that I post, I try and always post my more evergreen content.
Yeah, I do a terrible absolutely terrible job because I handle my own stuff. So it's, because I do a daily Monday through Friday. I'll do a daily LinkedIn, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I plan ahead and I'm really good with my calendar, but sometimes I get there on a Tuesday morning and I'm like, well, I don't know what I'm going to talk about today, just like everyone else. I was like, oh, okay, well, let me play some of those hits. Let me find a "Don't Build on Rented Land" really good classic post.
Exactly.
From 2013.
Yeah.
It's like, let me open Killing Marketing from 2017. What did we talk about there? So that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's been.
Yeah, well, that I'm not good at. I'm not good at re-promoting like our old book and all that stuff. That I'm not good at. Yeah, that the promotional side of the, remember I have a book, all that stuff is I'm not terribly good at that.
Did you we had a great live podcast last week.
Did we?
We did.
Was it great?
I don't know.
Is that what how we would
I haven't been paying attention to the feedback for various reasons over the past couple days.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was well received or not. I haven't even looked at the downloads. I'm assuming some people thought it was interesting and curious.
I got a couple of nice notes.
But I like the
people.
picture that was going around.
The audio turned out way better than I thought.
Oh my God! Right? I mean, you can hear that we're at an event, but it didn't.
Yeah.
It was fantastic. The folks at Evergreen did a great job with the setup, and there were a ton of podcasts done from that booth at Creator Economy Expo. I mean, they got everybody in there to do, because as you know, you're on the road right now with your setup, trying to get this thing going. If you go on the road and you want to do a podcast and you say, great, I want to do an interview, the first thing you think is, I got to take my microphone. I got to make sure I got my setup. Am I in a good location? How's the Wi-Fi? The whole thing. This was great because you and I just walked up and said, hey, we're here. Can we do this?
It was great. You slip on the headphones and away we went.
And it was great seeing Pamela Muldoon and her doing our wonderful introduction again, as she's done for the last 9 or 10 years.
That was so much fun. That was totally fun. Yeah.
But it was nice. I'm still getting people that said that they loved the energy at CEX and seeing all the people. And what's maybe the best compliment? I don't know if you received any compliments. Your session was really well attended, by the way. You had standing room.
Yeah, that didn't mean it was good. It was well attended, but I'm not sure.
No, seriously. I think for I know you kid me about this, but for a breakout session, I think you had the most people of anyone. So that's a testament to you. You just draw them in.
It's a wonderful crowd. I will tell you that it's a wonderful, wonderful crowd and a great community. And once again, you've done it again. You've built a very close, lovely community of people, and it's interesting to me to see all the content creators, the entrepreneurs really sort of opening their eyes. The number of times I heard, wow, these people look like me. In other words, they're the specific segment that you go after, that content entrepreneur, isn't necessarily the young wannabe influencer, right? It's that it's a lot of people who are, I'm not going to say older. What I'm going to say is just experienced is probably the better word.
It's their second or third career.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a second story, right? It's the second story for them, and that was really it was really very special. And
it was nice to see the curators like yourself, stick around. They're in the networking. Almost all the keynote speakers were everywhere. They were at they were at the parties. They were at Elliot's at the Hilton. It was nice to see that.
I learned a lot. It was great for me to go to be a consumer of content. Right. It was, it's one of the first conferences that I've gotten to attend in the last few years. So I'm and what I mean is conferences other than the ones that I sort of host. But it was wonderful to get to, Jay Klaus. I loved both of his talks, his session as well as his keynote. It was, there was some great content, and I learned a lot.
So, we're going to, it's interesting. I haven't even talked to people about it, but I'm floating the idea of doing it in the fall next year. But there's a lot of issues.
we go.
There's a lot of issues
All
here
right.
because the last thing I want to do is we don't want to go up against or interrupt people that, you've got Content Marketing World in the fall, you've got Marketing Profs and B2B in the fall. We don't compete with those conferences, but I don't want to get into any of those things.
Well,
I think this conference is better set for the fall than for the spring, in my opinion.
I mean, what you appreciate is the audience. You're right, the audience isn't, but it's one of the difficult things to do about scheduling new conferences in the fall, or honestly, sometime in the spring, is the competition for good speakers.
That's right.
Right, where the speakers are actually unavailable because they're speaking at other conferences.
Well, how many years were we up against, Content Marketing World? This is back in 13, 14. We were
Inbound,
up directly
yeah.
against Inbound
Yeah.
at HubSpot. So there were about
Every year.
10 to 15 speakers that did both. Like we would have them first, and then they would fly to Boston and do that one. And that's when, we were having hopefully decent conversations with HubSpot, and I'm just pleading with them, saying, please, because we had that time after Labor Day. I'm like, would you please not schedule?
Right.
Like, oh no,
exactly.
we've got the convention center booked for this time. I'm like, okay, well, when is that up? And let's have a conversation so we don't overlap.
Right.
It's better for the industry if we don't overlap. And then finally, it got to a point. Now I think things are okay. I mean, you're in it fall.
Well, I was going to say it got to a really great place the year after you left. So,
I didn't
see what I did there. Yeah.
You're probably right.
No, what I'm saying is that it took that many years for it to. I mean, it was one of those things literally where it was. To your point, it was about this conference, the convention center schedules. And convention center schedules, by the way, folks, are done in years, right? You make multi-year deals, right? So it's not the kind of thing you can just go, we'll just do it different next year. It's like, no. You have to both with Cleveland Convention Center as well as I forget where they're at. They're Boston,
whatever the Boston Convention Center
wherever
is down
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is they're a beautiful place. It was the one in Cleveland. I mean, they're just different sized venues. And you still have to book in advance. I mean, that's the problem we had with the first Creator Economy Expo, because we just said, so 6 months out, no, it's about 9 months out. We're like, okay, we want to do an event. Well, there's no space available anywhere. There was like we wanted to have it in Chicago. And there's like one hotel available. I'm like, and it's not a nice one. I'm like, that's not going to be a great experience. What do we do? So, Anyways, so you're getting up early for this.
I am. I'm up early for this. I'm in the lovely, beautiful mountains of Utah, staring out right now at a very full creek that's just beautiful, running right by the patio of my room here at this resort, and staring up at the beautiful snow-covered mountains here. And I'm here for my yearly retreat where I go with this mastermind community that I've been part of for the last decade or so. We get together and turn off our cell phones, basically turn off our laptops, and really talk about life and our own challenges and business and economics and what's going on in the world. And we just it's a retreat to sort of, clear your head and all that stuff. And it's a really great way for me to clean out the sort of muck, Marie Kondo, if you will, my brain. And it's
how many
it's
years
all
is
good.
this for you that you've been doing this event?
Well, technically, it would be 10, but I missed. Of course, we missed 2 years in a row, 2020 and 2021, because of COVID. And 2020, they did a virtual event that I attended, and it was okay.
Yeah,
I mean, it just doesn't work.
What are you going to do?
Yeah, it doesn't work that way. 2021, they had a virtual event that I didn't attend, if I'm completely honest, because of my experience with the first one. And then 2022, last year, I couldn't make because I had a death in the family and I had to fly. I had to fly to the funeral. So this is my first time back since 2019. So yeah.
Well, yeah, it sounds like one of those special events that.
It's great. Yeah.
And if you've got some world-class influencers in that group. I mean, obviously you can't say who they are, but
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds just amazing. Sounds like one of those conferences I would totally
They're
go.
very accomplished people. Yeah. I mean, and the funny thing is that very few of them are like, there are very few of them that you would have ever heard of, right? I mean, they're just very accomplished
It's like
people.
the power
in
behind
their
the power,
craft.
right? They're the ones that are making
yeah.
decisions happen, but they're not necessarily.
Yeah, they're CEOs of companies. They're big hedge fund managers. They're big. One's a religious leader out of New York. There's they're poets, musicians. It's a really eclectic group. It's wonderful.
Well, we got to get you on your way. You got up early specifically for this, so you could go do your thought leadershiping thing that you do later in the day. So we'll get on to the news of it, I would imagine.
Let's get to the show. We've got a good one actually, because there's some really fun stuff to talk about here. I think you're going to start to notice a theme, folks, as we get into this. So we'll first open up with, of course, I don't know if it's breaking news, but it's certainly new, very new news, and that is, of course, our good friend, our good friend Tucker Carlson. I think we can call him that, can't we?
I absolutely think so.
Yeah. He's getting into content marketing. We talked about this 2 shows ago before our live show, but yeah, here he goes. And I think, by the way, I called it with where he's ended up going. We'll talk a little bit about that and our predictions there. We'll also talk a little more about trust and how what Tucker Carlson is doing is really affecting the idea of trust as we come up on a new election. We'll segue that into a wonderful story that is also breaking this week around MrBeast and what he's been doing with his content and literally almost doubling his followers in a couple of days here. We'll talk a little bit about Google and Microsoft and how they may be doing the thing that we hoped that nobody would do, which is to start to introduce advertising and API advertising into generative AI content. And if we get time, we probably won't get time, but if we get time, we'll talk about how the platform era may be actually dead, or is it only mostly dead, as we like to say?
Mostly dead.
Mostly dead. We'll cover our Q&A segment as we always do now, and having a ton of fun with that. And then, of course, we'll get to our rants and raves, where I will provide a little bit of commentary about Salesforce's new focus, I guess is the word, on generative AI in its software suite. And Joe, well, he'll talk a little bit about Warren Buffett, because Warren Buffett has issued his annual letter. And as always, it's got some interesting and wonderful advice. All right. So, I mean, that's good stuff.
It's a good, solid show. I hope that we can provide 5 or 7 minutes of value from the next 45 minutes.
5 or 7. It's oddly specific, but okay.
That's probably right, isn't it? It's like I'll listen to a 60-minute program and 5 minutes of it is probably really good.
That's right.
So
that's right.
I think,
that's all
your
you get.
Expectations
That's all
low,
you
and
get.
you're bound to exceed them.
There
Let's
it
do
is.
This thing.
All right. Well, we will open up with a news story. There are a ton of outlets covering this, but we'll link to Reuters. And I just chose Reuters because it felt like it was the most non-newsy. I don't know.
Not opinionated.
Yeah, exactly. The headline for the Reuters article is former Fox News host Tucker Carlson will relaunch his show on Twitter. Features a wonderful image of Tucker Carlson just looking a little puffy, I have to admit.
It was a little
but
puffy.
Anyway,
he looks much better now. They used an image from 6 years ago. It's just weird. But whatever.
It's just I mean, that may be their only editorial comment. But anyway, the article opens up by saying former Fox News host Tucker Carlson, who was taken off the air by the network last month, said on Tuesday he would relaunch his show on Twitter, quote unquote, soon. Fox News Media and Carlson agreed to part ways last month, shortly after parent company settled for $787 million defamation suit in which the top-rated host played a starring role. The outspoken Carlson embraced conservatives' issues and delivered his views with a style that made his primetime show, Tucker Carlson Tonight, the highest-rated cable news program in the key 25 to 54 age demographic of the most-watched U.S. cable news network. Ratings, however, have slumped after his departure. And starting soon, says Carlson, we'll be bringing a new version of our show we've been doing for the last 6.5 years to Twitter, Carlson said in a video posted on the social media platform. We bring some other things too, which we'll tell you, but for now, we're just grateful to be here. Interesting. Elon Musk then started to post, and this basically is the way the news article sort of finishes up here, said, yeah, we haven't signed a deal of any kind, said Musk, and basically said that he, trust, what was his tweet? Trust nothing? Trust absolutely nothing?
Don't even trust. Yeah, it's just you less than nothing. Trust nothing. He's basically he's throwing out there, and this is what both Tucker and Elon are really good at doing right now, is to make sure that we are clear on the fact that we shouldn't trust anything out there, anything that's put out there. And did you watch Tucker's video that he put on LinkedIn? Did you watch the 3-minute video?
I watched the first, minute of it, and then just got
it.
Yeah,
you can see how this is playing out. Well, first of all, I mean, we want to talk about his decision to do this. I think you did call it, that he was going to make this jump to Twitter. And he makes the point in the video that Twitter is the last bastion for trust in the world because both sides are there and whatever. But look, Tucker goes on, and he basically says that you can't trust anybody and everybody's out to get you, and for just as divisive as ever. And it's just sad. And it's actually sad because we're coming up to, a presidential election here where, I guess the question is, and I don't even know the answer, what happens to an election when you literally can't trust anything because everyone's telling you not to trust it, or you really can't trust it because of all the stuff that's going on with generative AI. It's a little bit scary what's going on, and Tucker's going to take his part in it. What do you think about him launching on Twitter? And Elon made it clear he is not being paid by Twitter. This is not like a Twitter-funded effort. Tucker is just choosing to go on Twitter and will be treated, according to Elon, just like any other content creator. What do you think about the choice?
Well, I think it's a really interesting one, and I think we talked about this 2 weeks ago, where we said, you took Tucker to task actually by saying, look, you had your chance. You should have built an email list. You should have built, an owned media property. You should have built, the idea of building an audience as an individual was his opportunity for a decade, right? As he's been on and clearly he failed to do that, as evidenced. And the only reason we have evidence now is because he's actually decided to go to Twitter, which of course is every content creator's fatal flaw in launching a new show, which is to go on rented land. And so he's trying to build an audience. Clearly, he's trying to capture some of what he had, and probably figured Twitter was his best chance, right? He didn't really have a YouTube channel, Facebook is probably not the right place for it. TikTok, he's not a TikTok guy, let's be honest. And so it's like, okay, where can I go easily and make a splash and have an audience and do stuff? I mean, what is a Twitter show? I mean, does anybody have a Twitter show? I mean, that first of all just seems silly. But
honestly, that's the only thing that I liked about this, because he has a huge following on Twitter. I mean, his little poster, I'm looking at it right now. So this is live, and it's had 120 million views. And he posted it on May 9th, so 2 days ago from the time we're recording this. 187,000 retweets, lots of comments, and all that stuff. So I could see that being a thing, but at the same time, so he's going, hey, the first Twitter show like this, kind of like when Twitter Spaces, and there's some people are doing well with Twitter Spaces, but most aren't, but you can have a few. Why not use Twitter as a place to let your followers know where your show is going to be at, and not put it on that platform so you could create it? Now, if there's something, maybe I'm not giving him enough credit. Maybe there's something else where you can go and get some kind of a membership or a subscription where he can start to build direct relationships with this audience. But he could literally do what happened to Donald Trump. He could build up a really amazing audience, and everyone wants to watch the Tucker Carlson Twitter show or whatever the case is. And then something's going to happen. He violates some terms of service on Twitter, or Elon doesn't like him anymore, which happens every day. I don't like this guy. I don't like this gal. Whatever.
He gets deplatformed.
Deplatformed. So it just seems like he's going right into the situation that he was at before with Fox.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt for the moment and just and say that I would bet that the reason he says "quote unquote" soon is because they are building some sort of infrastructure. There's some sort of scaffolding that has to get built for him to have a show that may end up debuting "quote unquote" on Twitter. That may ultimately then lead to. I could see it very easily leading to a website or an email newsletter or something that has merch or, his, and doing all those things. And I could see him very quickly building an audience there. And, I think it goes right to the other story that we can link to in the show notes, certainly, which comes to us courtesy of Axios, which is the headline is a trust nothing election. And it opens with the idea that Elon and Tucker are quote unquote joining forces, but are they really joining forces? Because Carlson, of course, launched his video, and then Musk said, no, we're not, we don't have a deal together on any of this. And as Elon tweeted, trust nothing, not even nothing, which is like, I mean, it's like pass the bong, Elon, right? I mean, come on. Okay. All right. That's you very, very cute. You're very philosophical. But this idea of trust in media has really come down to the individual, right? Yes. It's really coming down to who do you trust, not what institution do you trust, where it used to be the institution, right? It used to be the institution of CBS News or CNN, and we could talk about CNN and Trump's town hall if we wanted to, but that whole thing, where the institution is really just made up of individuals, and you see this with New York Times and the way they're doing with their writers and on all of that. It's starting to really come down to who do you trust, not what institution do you trust.
It's so interesting. We were talking before the show. I really do believe that this is sort of the issue of our time as content creators. Like, we have to wrap our hands around it. I just looked it up. I was trying to figure out, okay, what's the current trust level of major institutions? And Gallup did a poll last year and said right now the trust level is at 27%. 27% of Americans trust. But it's not even that. The story went on, and I'll put it in the show notes if I can find it again. But it was saying it's not the trust issue that's being diminished. It's mistrust that's growing. So it's the fact that they look at institutions. It's not just that I don't trust institutions. It says I mistrust institutions. I think they're out to hurt me. I think they're dangerous. This is what's scary. So when this happens, at least according to what I was looking at, it says that's when you have individuals, and of course we've covered on this show, businesses that have an advantage here to become the trustful sources, the trustworthy sources. So if you were a content creator right now, you should focus everything on how you can build trust over a long-term basis. This is the opportunity, because those places that we used to go to for trust aren't there because it's even worse than that. It's that we think they're dangerous. And me, not you, but lots of other people.
So Edelman also does their trust barometer every year, right? And one of the things that it came out with last year in 2022 was the newly developed sort of trend that we audiences, consumers, now expect businesses to act. Because what they found then was that business was the last institution that was actually trusted. In other words, the institution of mainstream media isn't trusted any longer. And by the way, it's the lowest of the distrusted all media, mainstream media, meaning just any media. Then there's nonprofits, NGOs. They are considered as sort of trusted or ethical, but not considered terribly capable. So they don't fall into the trusted category. And then government was considered both incapable and in large part unethical, only ranking slightly above mainstream media in terms of an institution. And then you have business, which was the only one in the upper right quadrant, which was both considered ethical as well as capable.
Which is crazy.
And which is crazy, right?
Yeah.
But that's our opportunity as marketers. And this year, so the punchline is that this year, of course, they talk about exactly what you just mentioned, right? The headline for the Trust Barometer from Edelman this year is we are deeply polarized. And the remediation, if they double down on that first recommendation, businesses, as they say, businesses are expected to act. As the most trusted institution, business should leverage its comparative advantage to inform debate, deliver solutions on everything from climate to DEI, which is, of course, diversity, equity, inclusion, and skill training. And so that's the opportunity for marketers, for content creators, is that having a point of view about the way the world works is not only something that's an opportunity for marketers, but it's actually a responsibility for developing trust in the culture.
Well, I think whether that's a overall marketing goal, content marketing program goal, but if you set the BHAG and said, well, we need to be the most trusted resource for our customers, our audience in this particular niche, I really do believe, and of course, this is what we've done for the past 20 years or tried to do, is take that and create some either a dotted line or a direct line to revenue. To make the case that if we are, HubSpot is trying to do this right now. Arrow Electronics is doing it. Cleveland Clinic is doing this right now. They believe that if we are the most trusted resource in our industry, we will generate significantly more revenue. It's just that's the long game to play. So if you're in it for the short game, forget it. You can't build.
But it's even
can't build trust.
It's
in a
even
short
expanding. That's exactly right. And the thing is, it's expanding beyond even. We talked about the Budweiser, the Bud Light challenge.
Yep.
Of course, and what they're going through right now with, looking at kind of a half-assed point of view about the way that they approached LGBTQ issues. It's consumers are now expecting leadership to come from business on the idea of what, the ways that we should be behaving and creating that trust in what you can consume. Like, what should we believe? Like, that's ultimately what we're talking about here, is because the news, that's all news is what are you going to believe out there? And if the only answer is entertainment, news entertainment, which is really what all these news programs are, CNN and MSNBC and Fox News, it's just entertainment. And it's outrage entertainment, of course, but it's the kind of thing where if we can't believe it, if we have to find individuals to trust, who are we going to look to? Businesses are kind of the logical answer there, and content creators are the really logical answer. So it can be Tucker or it can be us.
Yeah,
that's what it comes down to.
Do you see? You obviously were working with marketing leadership at this thing, and I was on a podcast the other day talking about internal communications and what we need to do to make our cases for our content programs. Do they get that the most trusted source long term will win the lion's share of business? Is there just content champions in the organization to get that, or do they really have to make the case, or do people get that now?
No, they for the most part they get it. Unfortunately, there is a tension. And the tension right now is between the short-term thinking of ROI, which is unfortunate because of the way that corporations are measured, by quarter by quarter by quarter, instead of year by year, or even decade by decade. So the long-term, long-view ideas that we're talking about here are often snuffed out very quickly with short-term needs of ROI, right? So and I'll even talk a little bit about this in my commentary a little later, where the bright shiny object idea bleeds into that idea, right? So you see this a lot with climate change right now. Last year, every other company had some sort of ESG or focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion messaging, or some sort of comms program around the climate, that sort of thing, right? And a lot of that right now is like, we just got to put leads in the funnel. And so we're not going to put a lot of effort toward that right now. And then a lot of companies got called out on it because they didn't have a long-term plan for it. So they're like, okay, they're going to take a step back and sort of reformulate their plan. So I think it's right now a lot of the tension between the short-term needs of the business versus the long-term goals of the business. And those two things are in tension right now.
Interesting. Yeah. I just... Wow, if you have and I totally get the quarterly pressure. I mean, our budgets, when I used to work at Penton even, I mean, they were defined by, can the chief marketing officer move beyond what they need for the quarterly and think over the next 2 years, the impact that we're trying to make. And that's where, well, I mean, you know this, we've talked about it on the program. I used to sign deals that said, well, we wouldn't do a one-time magazine. Initially we did, and then we realized that didn't work out. You put all this upfront effort into doing a quarterly issue that never happens again. And you're like, well, that was a big waste of everyone's time and energy. So I would say that you have to do at least 4 issues, or we won't take the job. So it's a little bit of a risk. But I wanted to make the case that, hey, this is a long-term program. Some of my peers, they would do 3 years, which I loved them for it. That's a very tough sell. Said we want a 3-year deal on this whole thing, kind of like the convention center selling a 3 or 4 year deal.
That's exactly it, right? I mean, when I was back in TV, you would have I mean, if you can even imagine this, right? When I was working for Showtime networks, the cable operators, right, would make 10-year, decade-long carriage deals, right? So in other words, you agree to carry HBO or Showtime or Nickelodeon or MTV or whatever it is on your network, on your cable company for 10 years. And interesting things started to happen, which is right around the early, call it late 90s, early 2000s, as the internet started to really sort of emerge. There was a fascinating thing where the over-the-top services were just starting to get, just beginning, right? Sort of the idea of, are we going to get our television through the internet, or are we going to start getting our programming through the internet? And as you started to get into 2008, 2009, 2010, that reality started to really happen, right? With with Netflix coming online and all those kinds of things. But here you had cable companies and the executives in those companies still making 10-year deals. Right? They're still making those 10-year deals, and what they're doing is they're like, hey, I'm not going to risk not signing up HBO for my cable operator and looking at how we might evolve into over-the-top television, because I'm just going to wait for the kid behind me, because I'm going to do this 10-year deal, and then by the time 10 years rolls around, I'm out of here. I'm out of here anyway. I'm retired. So it's this fascinating thing where regimes literally make deals that the youth and the organization pay for.
That's incredible. So
yeah.
Do we want to talk about MrBeast as well?
We do, a little bit. Yeah, this is a very quick story that we can cover because it just feeds right into this idea of trust and what's going on in the world of individuals. MrBeast, of course, who we've talked about many times on this show. The headline, and there's a few outlets covering it, especially in email newsletters. We found one online that you can link to. MrBeast is on the conquest to make history on Instagram with 7 million followers in the last 24 hours. Jimmy Donaldson, better known as MrBeast, of course, as the article says, is a talented content creator, philanthropist, entrepreneur, and more. Basically, he had a birthday, very much like our friend Joe Polizzi did. He had a birthday, and he saw a recent rise in his TikTok numbers. He is the most subscribed individual as well. He's the king of the YouTube, as the article described him. And basically, the account, I guess, and you know a little more about this, he basically got on Instagram, offered up money to celebrate his birthday, And over the course of the next 24 hours, the account saw 7 million new followers, basically giving $50,000 away for his birthday.
Yeah.
The numbers he gives away are, by the way, just astounding. That's just astounding to me. But
well, it's interesting.
And explain a little more. Give it a little more context.
Let me give you a little. There's been an update. So basically, celebrates his 25th birthday, and for that, he's announces $50,000 he's given away to 5 people, split among 5 people, and then he's upped that to $100,000. And because of that whole thing, because he said you had to follow MrBeast and then comment, whatever, 19 million likes, 13 million comments. He has doubled, so this even more than the 7 million, he's doubled his followers to 40 million for a pittance of money for him. I mean, MrBeast spends $50 million a year on videos and whatever. But I just thought it was amazing for a very little amount of money in an investment. If you say, I'm going to spend a couple $100,000 to get 20 million people to like my Instagram channel, you're like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever. But more and more, I mean, this is just it's a side thing for him, and it's great and from an audience subscription standpoint. But when we get back to this whole Tucker Carlson thing and the trust thing, I mean, you have Jimmy Donaldson here. He might, like, we talked about it, I think, a year ago. Like, if he decided to run for president, I think he would win.
He's certainly got a following, yeah,
because he is the most trusted.
He's definitely the real. When we think about influencers, he's really there,
and he's trusted. He's actually a really good dude. He's doing some amazing things. He just bought out. This came out, I don't know, a couple hours ago, where he bought out like half his cul-de-sac in North Carolina, and he's giving houses away to his friends and stuff like that. It's just crazy stuff that he can do now because he is the most followed person on the planet. Because just, hey, throw it out there. Started in 2012 and just did videos on YouTube. And it took him 3 years to get to 30,000 subscribers on YouTube. And now he's got 100 and whatever, almost 200 million people on YouTube that are following him. So, yeah, when you think about, oh, wait, where do I want to put my money? Do I go and advertise on an NBC or the Olympics or CNN or whatever, or do I want to advertise with MrBeast, who's getting 10 times the amount of people watching him?
Right,
it's crazy.
Right,
but again,
well, and by the way, that the math totally works. Right, I mean, you think about the number of brands out there, because it sounds insane, right? You're going to give away $100,000 for followers, right? And but the math totally works if you look at it in the same way that a consumer brand, if some sort of B2C brand would spend 10 times that on let's call it a 90-day flight across broadcast media of a brand advertising, which may or may not, by the way, have a URL to convert or to go follow or to go visit a website or something like that. It may literally just be a bunch of, in the case of Budweiser, a bunch of trucks driving down a dirt road talking about how we're all patriots. That they routinely spend that for brand level advertising. And what he's doing is he's actually showing an ROI on it, right? By getting some number of followers or some number of conversions that he can now leverage, and spending less money actually than you would arguably spend on a broadcast media idea. Now, whether it complies with Facebook or Meta's terms of service or not is a different story, but that's, he's pushing the boundaries for sure.
I guess the thing that I'm trying to grasp is when we talk about the media, we're thinking of what? Like Washington Post, New York Times, CNN, right? The media that's happening before our eyes, that we're, like the most influential media out there, are not those places. That's right. MrBeast. I mean, I'm going to check out Gary Vaynerchuk's conference next week, VCon. Those kinds of individuals who have put together these media companies that nobody's calling media companies. They call them influencer marketing or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
These are the most influential media companies of our time, and we're still getting it wrong, I think, as a collective. So, these are the
and we talked about this 2 weeks ago.
Trust is being born. This is the new, when we're going to talk about the election and all these things, people are going to listen to these people more than anyone else.
Yeah, and we talked about this 2 weeks ago when we said that you have more people are watching MrBeast and then are watching than watch TV cable news on any given night. And so that's when you start recognizing how much more viewers some of these individuals have more than programming on what we would call mainstream media. It starts to get really eye-popping quick.
Well, we're not going to get to it, but now I can put it in the show notes. Part of our last story was this one that from Ad Age. This is podcasters impact consumers' purchasing decisions more than influencers. Study finds. Basically, said podcast hosts are one of the most influential figures in driving purchasing decisions today. It just goes to exactly what we're saying. And they're
not us, by the way. It's not us.
Yeah, no,
it's other podcasters.
That's almost comical, Robert. Yeah. Wouldn't be us, but other podcasters.
Not us.
Other
podcasts. Other proper podcasts.
Like real shows. Not this.
That's right.
Not this fake show.
That's right. All right, very quickly, let's cover this other story before we get to our Q&A segment here, which is about Google and Microsoft doing what was hoped wouldn't be done, but of course it was inevitable probably. Two announcements this week, one that's actually happening and one that's going to happen. The first we'll cover from Search Engine Land, which is that Microsoft Advertising has now launched Chat API to monetize AI chat. The ads for Chat API will allow partners to serve ads on chat platforms from Microsoft as well as other companies. So basically, the article opens up by saying Microsoft Advertising today has announced a new API, Ads for Chat API, which will allow publishers and online services and apps to deliver advertising through their chat interfaces. This new Chat API will allow sites, apps, etc., to customize their chat experience, to choose from ad formats that work best for them, and incorporate relevant ads for their audiences, according to Microsoft. The new Chat API allows these publishers to build their own chat experiences on sites and apps serving ads either from Microsoft or other companies. So here we go. That's the first one. And then just very quickly here so that we can talk a little bit about this. The second one is coming from Media Post, which is a Google announcement, which is coming. The big Google I/O event was this week. And basically they have said that they remain committed to search ads powered by generative AI. As Google brings generative artificial intelligence into search through something it calls Search Generative Experience, Google might be the worst company
why can't
naming
they name
things
anything?
Ever. They just really can't name anything. Anyway, an experiment in Search Labs advertising will remain an important part of the experience, the company said Wednesday. As the search ecosystem continues to evolve with an increased focus on AI, search ads will continue to play a critical role as additional sources of useful information, while helping millions of businesses be discovered online, said Vidya Srinivasan, the Vice President and General Manager of Google Ads. So basically, they've got this stuff coming through search where you're going to be able to use generative AI to generate more ads versus Microsoft, which is going to allow an API to basically serve up ads in through interfaces. What say you? I definitely have a take on this. But what say you?
My take on this is easy. This is just nothing but bluster around AI and making sure that when people think of Microsoft and Google and AI, they're thinking about them as together. There's an interesting, I think you saw this as well. This was in Morning Brew the other day. There was a research project done by the National Bureau of Economic Research that said over the past year, there have been 1,000 mentions of AI on S&P 500 earnings calls. And those that mention AI are based, I'm going to get this right. Companies embracing generative AI have been earning shareholders 0.4% more per day than those with less exposure. This is...
Yep.
So they're more valuable just by mentioning them, just by mentioning AI.
Well,
that's what this is. In my opinion.
Welcome to the great AI wash. Right, this is everything is going to be washed in AI for the
just
next
like blockchain
12
was
months,
years ago, and just like metaverse,
like climate change, ESG. AI, it's basically this is the new way to say that you're dancing with the cool kids and that you've got value and that you can, and this is going to be a real issue because there are going to be a lot of companies that talk about the inclusion or infusion of AI into their products, and it's just not true. And so you're going to be, it's going to be a lot of caveat emptor in terms of what you're buying in the way of true. And by the way, it probably will give AI a black eye before too long, right? Just very much like what happened with the metaverse, and we'll get to this in our Q&A. But what is AI? What is a metaverse? What is crypto? This lack of the rise of it so quickly, and the fundamental misunderstanding of what it is will encourage people who aren't using it in the right way, or let's call it a moral way, to launch all kinds of things that are going to ultimately give it. It's the black eye is coming. I guarantee
it always does. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, it was 2 years ago that everyone was getting into NFTs and crypto and whatever, and it just went hockey stick growth, and then you just saw the fallout. Now there's still a number of wonderful things going on, but you had 95% of those companies are gone.
Yeah.
I don't know if the same thing is going to happen with AI. There's maybe a little bit more behind this, but you're gonna see a big fallout here. So not
That's
a
right.
bad strategy just to come out and say, every couple weeks, let's throw out a press release about what we're doing with AI.
Of course,
Because
That's
what?
exactly
It works. It works right now.
That's right.
Microsoft's
It gets you coverage.
Stock price is benefiting because of their integration with AI and OpenAI and ChatGPT and everything else. Bing.
Yep.
Bing was dead. Now everybody's talking about
I
Bing.
know.
How does that happen?
AI.
Yeah, amazing. Crazy.
All right, let's get to our Q&A segment here. Speaking of new technologies, we have a lovely question, not audio. We would have, Brian, you gotta
He was
do
busy.
this in audio, man.
He's at the event. He's at another
no,
event right now.
I-
He's just it's crazy.
I refuse that. Yeah. Anyway, Brian, thank you very much for the question. It's a
Brian
great question.
Piper. Yeah,
so
Brian
Brian
Piper.
writes in, Brian Piper, who is a friend and family of the show. Thank you very much, Brian, for that. Here's Brian's question, Joe. We know that technology impacts content marketing. Once computing technology figures out how to make the metaverse a reality, and we know it will, what do you think content marketing is going to look like in the future metaverse? And what can content marketers and content entrepreneurs do to prepare ourselves to be able to succeed and excel in this future space? So I definitely have an answer for Brian, but what do you think?
It's interesting. I've struggled with this whole metaverse thing. Here's my take on it. I don't know if we know what that means. I think when people say metaverse, correct me if I'm wrong, Robert, that we think of this immersive 3D experience.
Yeah, that's right.
Whether you have a blockchain component of that or not, I don't know. I think that's arguable, because you could say, Roblox or whatever, or Epic Games and what they're doing. But I don't know what that is going to be. It's almost like, I don't know if this is a good example or not, but this is what I thought of. I thought of when e-commerce was just starting to take off. This is 25 years ago. And Walmart waited. And Walmart said, we don't have our arms wrapped around this yet. We're going to wait a little bit and see what happens. We're going to experiment. We're going to absolutely bring in experts that understand this, but we're not going to put everything into the bucket of e-commerce and digital. Well, I think Walmart's benefited from that. I mean, if you look at their revenues right now, I think that almost 20% of their total revenues are digital. They're growing at 20% a year. They didn't rush it, and they figured this thing out, and it's worked for them. And I think people trust, if you can trust Walmart, whatever. I think people appreciate that. I like that kind of strategy. And at the same time, we heard this flat out. It's funny because when we talked about metaverse or NFT or blockchain or anything like that, and we had our talks at CEX last year, those were the highest attended ones. People wanted, and this year they were the lowest attended. And I talked to some of the speakers that this is still a big issue, and they said you can't call it blockchain and you can't call it NFTs anymore, and you can't call it crypto. You have to do sort of what Starbucks is doing with their Odyssey program, which is extremely successful. It's just a loyalty program.
That's right.
It's just a loyalty program.
Yeah,
it has nice digital collectibles. It's a wonderful experience. There's gamification to the whole thing. It's working really well. I don't think 90% of the people that are on Odyssey know that it's on a blockchain.
Yes, that's exactly right.
So we get away from the technology. So that's my instinct. And Brian, I'm not answering your question at all. But I think when we think of metaverse, we are thinking about the technology. And frankly, we don't know. We have to get into what are we trying to accomplish? What's the experience thing? And that comes back to what we're talking about on this whole show. What we can do as brand marketers and content entrepreneurs is focus on long-term trust building by delivering valuable content experiences consistently over a long period of time and have some kind of subscription component. That's it.
Yeah. Here's what. So I'll attempt to sort of provide a little bit of a more granular answer for Brian.
Please do, because mine wasn't granular at all.
Yeah, but I do appreciate your focus on the technology there, because it's a bit like, the equivalent would be back in 2001 or 2002. Somebody, this isn't a knock on Brian's question. It's literally talking about crypto or the idea of blockchain or the idea of metaverse. It's the equivalent of 2002 going, hey, how is HTML going to change your business? And so it isn't about the underlying technology. It is about the experience that you create. So I know that shocks most of you to hear me say something like that, but it is about the experience. And what I think about the metaverse is, I think it's a big question mark right now, because I think what we're seeing consumerized is a reluctance, certainly, a slowing of the adoption of virtual reality, which is kind of a must for the metaverse. Unless you start to broaden out your definition of metaverse to include things like the audio metaverse that, you would include, the AirPods and how people get in, if you're going to include that,
augmented reality,
then that's fine.
Sort of getting into that space.
Yeah, or anything like that, right? But if we're talking purely about virtual worlds, where people use virtual reality headsets to enter those worlds and interact with people and interact with businesses, so I think there's a question mark of whether that's the next segue, or whether there will actually. And when by segue, I don't mean that it's a complete failure. What I mean is that it's a very niche product, which, so things like telemedicine or, for example, my brother-in-law, who's an architect, uses virtual reality all the time. He actually meets clients in virtual spaces to talk about what he's going to do with their house, what materials they're going to use, and they meet in the house. Like they meet, he takes his CAD drawings, does a 3D rendering of them. They meet in that 3D rendering, and they look around and they go, here's where the bathroom's going to be, and they walk through it together. And it's a great use of 3D, but it's a very niche orientation. So I could very easily see if there are audiences there to be had where the metaverse, where brands can certainly use the metaverse for sponsored versions of that, right? So what if you had a sponsored metaverse where my brother-in-law could go in and, sponsored by DeWalt or Home Depot or something like that, where, there is a place where he can easily set up an account and go in and meet with clients, and sponsored with, the different kinds of brands, and make it easy to purchase things, and you can purchase the materials right there. I can totally see that being a content marketing kind of experience that the metaverse would support. The same way in e-commerce now that we're seeing these very quiet, generally speaking, experiments that are going on with e-commerce, brand luxury brands like Louis Vuitton and others who have created these usually seasonal based experiences for the metaverse, where you can go in and you can interact with the brand and those kinds of things. So I think it's a big question mark right now whether or not it will take off. But if it does, there's a lot of opportunity for brands to create sponsored experiences or hosted experiences for their customers to really drive trust, as Joe said. So I think there's a big opportunity there, but I think a lot of it hinges on how well the adoption of virtual reality takes off.
And there's too much friction at the moment. As our friend Jesse Cole from Savannah Bananas would say, you got to get rid of the friction. And in a blockchain metaverse environment, there's way too much friction.
I mean, we'll see. We'll see what happens with Apple, right? I mean, Apple's going to introduce their new glasses, which will it be the new iPod Airs, or will it be Google Glass. I think it's really a big question mark. If it takes off, if the Apple technology takes off and consumerizes this, then I think, metaverse game back on in a hot way. All right. Well, now before we get to rants and raves, I just want to remind you that, unlike our friend Brian, you can actually leave us an audio question. We want those audio questions. We want your questions. Please go visit us at thisoldmarketing.site. Leave us a voicemail. We love hearing the dulcet sounds of your beautiful voices. You can also there subscribe to Joe's amazing newsletter called The Tilt, and of course get all the wonderful goodness around the content entrepreneur economy. Or you can link over to our little Experience Advisors community, which we're having a ton of fun at over on Discord and all those kinds of things. And there's a newsletter associated with that as well. Or you can bathe in the 374 episodes of the wonderful chuckle-headed goodness. I'm getting a lot of notes that you guys enjoy the chuckle-headed goodness phrase of This Old Marketing. And of course, the show notes for all of our episodes, which most of you don't care that much about, but we like providing them for you anyway. So Also you can get us on Twitter, hashtag us up at This Old Marketing. We're on Twitter looking at that thing until either Tucker Carlson's show kicks us off or something else happens. And or send us an email or just send up a smoke signal. We want your ideas for stories. We want your questions and bring them on. All right, now let's get to our rants and rave section where we go off on a little bit of a rant or a little bit of a rave over something. Do you want to go first or shall I go first?
Really quick, and I usually cover this every year, but it was Berkshire Hathaway's annual meeting, so that's when our friend Warren Buffett has a wonderful statement about the state of the economy, Berkshire Hathaway, and his basic thoughts on life. And that's what I love reading, his annual reports. So I'll put this in the show notes. There's a couple really good parts. One of them is he goes on, it's funny, nobody does this in annual report. He goes on and talks about how wonderful Charlie Munger is in the annual report, and that having a great partner, much like this podcast that we're on right now, is so critical to your future, to challenge you and all that kind of stuff. But there's one thing that's really getting a lot of press right now. I'm sure you've seen it. Everyone's covered it. But somebody asked, in addition to this, somebody asked, like, okay, how should I be successful, Warren? Like, what are the things I need to do? And he basically said, you need to write the obituary that you want and then behave accordingly. And that's so difficult to do. It's so tough, but it's so easy at the same time. It's like, what do you want to be remembered for? Write those things down, write it as an obituary, did this, did that, and then go ahead and figure out how you're going to get there. It's absolutely beautiful. So there's a part in this, which is on page 8 of the annual report. Again, I'll put it in the show notes, where he goes through all these things and says, here's a few of my thoughts. The world is full of foolish gamblers, and they will not do as well as the patient investor. Everything is about patience. It's about consistency. It's in line with what we talked about on the show and building trust and how patience can be learned. It goes on, having a long attention span and the ability to concentrate on one thing for a long time is a huge competitive advantage. So this is just things that life learnings from Warren Buffett. And I love Warren, except for I don't like his take on crypto. Other than that, I love Warren Buffett. This is a really good way to learn from Warren, and I'll put it in the show notes. But that obituary thing, I haven't done it yet. I don't know if you have, Robert. I'm thinking about doing that. I'm thinking about actually putting that together and saying, okay, what do I want to be remembered for, and then what do I need to do to get there? So,
well, I have a slightly less creepy way of doing that, which is one of the things that I love to have some of my clients do, and this is really more toward people that I coach rather than sort of the enterprise clients. Are what I call write your future bio. Yeah. And what I mean by that is, what I have people do is pretend you're getting introduced at a conference 5 years from now or 10 years from now, whichever is your favorite window. I like 5 years because there's so much change in the world. So write how you're introduced. So and literally write it like, you would want the speaker to say it. So obviously it has to be in the past tense. I've authored a book and I'm now considered one of the foremost experts in this, or whatever it is. Write your 5-year bio, and it's a great way to sort of put your pull the future forward.
That's probably a little bit less morbid than the obituary.
It's a little bit. Same
type of thing.
Yeah, it's a little bit.
Do that.
It's the same idea. It's the same idea.
Do that. All right. What do you got? What do you got for you?
You do you. You do you. So I have a wonderful article. I just wanted to, I guess it's a rave about the article, but sort of a weird commentary. I think it's a really important thing for us to talk about, especially what we talked about on the show. So first of all, hats off to my friend Ron Miller over at TechCrunch. I've known Ron for, 15 years now, going all the way back to his writing days for so many different publications when I met Ron, and his coverage of technology is just fantastic, and I love his thinking. And he now writes for TechCrunch and has for a couple of years, and now is really writing some of the more important feature articles that they have. And he wrote one about Salesforce, and it's about his take on Salesforce. As the headline says, Salesforce is betting that its own content can bring more trust to generative AI. And he talks about how basically at a recent Salesforce, they're calling it the Salesforce World Tour, which is basically an analyst and reporter and sort of public relations tour about everything going on at Salesforce. They've really pivoted. They've really pivoted from talking about customer data platforms and the things that were really sort of front and center, and they've moved right into the generative AI stuff. So as he notes, during the 67-minute keynote, it took less than 5 minutes for the CMO Sarah Franklin to get into talking about AI and what Salesforce is doing with generative AI and ChatGPT and all those kinds of things. And every single product leader that got up started talking about the same thing, right? Started talking about how they're infusing AI. But the main thing was this idea of trust. And it fits so wonderfully into our show theme here, because what they're saying is that what they're trying to do to differentiate themselves as Salesforce is to provide for better learning models. In other words, not using the large language models that are available through open source or through ChatGPT that are using general internet, but to actually start using curated learning models and give them a trust score. And I think that's a really interesting idea. I'm not sure that it's going to come from an enterprise software company. This is where and it's more question than a sort of, I guess, commentary, which is not sure that an enterprise software company is going to be the one to provide me a trusted learning model. I think you almost have to build it either yourself, or you have to hire and basically you have to create it or curate it yourself in order to be trusted. It's a really interesting challenge, which is because they go on to talk very much about how, it's about accuracy. It's about more than hallucinations, just sort of trying to get into the idea that if my company works in Salesforce and wants to generate, use generative AI to send emails or to send, to write content or to create things that may help my marketing strategy, I not only want to have it be mine, I want it to be generated out of the data that my company trusts. And that, I think, is a really interesting challenge. And I applaud Salesforce for sort of discussing it and talking about it, because I happen to believe that large language models will be verticalized, maybe even down to individuals, like where you have a large language model, I have one. Excuse me. But it'll be interesting to see over time how granular language models get in terms of how we use generative AI and where the trust faction comes into that.
It's going to be crazy. It's going to be really very interesting. But what interests me is the quick pivot that Salesforce made. I mean, it did not take. Pivot for a lot of companies. It did not take long, and everyone's AI, everyone's chat.
It gets to the
that.
It gets to what we were talking about, right? The idea that everybody's latching onto this.
Are you going to survive? Should we?
I am going to survive. Yeah,
that
I have a
means
little
that
thing in my throat.
we've used our allotted time for the show, and we probably need to wrap up. But while you compose,
absolutely should.
compose, I want to know what you're doing this weekend. But I think a lot of people.
I am basically
a lot of people already know this because you've already given to this cause. But on Monday, it's our Orange Effect Foundation's 100 holes for marathon golf tournament that we have. So I'll be golfing 100 holes during the day. It takes about 12 hours to do this. We golf the entire time at a very rapid rate, and we've almost hit our goal. So if you want to help us out, one last push. We're at 100holes.info, and we're at 40,000 of our 50,000 goal. I really think we can get it. A few more days to get to 10,000 for now. Thank you all for donating. Including Robert, you donated. Thank you so much for all your support. But actually do this thing Monday. Great. So all these folks. Any other last resort option for speech therapy. And so this is our biggest fundraiser of the year. So thank you everyone for supporting that. That's what we're going to be doing this week.
It's a brilliant thing. Yeah, it's a brilliant thing. Yeah, as for me, doing nothing so wonderful and kind for the world, I will be flying home from this wonderful location, having hopefully a nice, relaxing weekend, and then getting right back to it. We have new clients to deal with. We have wonderful, things to work on. I'm getting ready for my book launch. I'm expecting my galleys this week,
Nice.
so to start looking at that. Yeah, so it's busy. We start the middle of May, and here we go, and hopefully refreshed and all of that.
There you go.
Just coming out of a great week. Yeah,
Sounds like a plan.
all right, everybody. Thank you so much. And again, we want your questions. Send us questions via voicemail, and of course, wonderful to see you. And we will see you again next week. And remember, in the meantime, it's your story to tell. Tell it well. We'll see you next week on This Old Marketing.